Good morning, boys and girls. I'm Eleanor Hawkins, and welcome to Telestory Time. I'm going to read from Heydays and Holidays, an old book. Easter, usually April. This is the Sunday of joy. All Christians everywhere rejoice that Christ is risen. They fill the churches with flowers and music. They all dress in their Easter best. They go to church and then visit friends. Long ago, before there were Christians, people celebrated in honor of Easter, the goddess of spring. That is where the name of Easter comes from. They celebrated the rising sun, the budding flowers, the coming of the long, warm spring days, the story of the risen Christ from the grave, which is called the resurrection, which means that we open our hearts to love and joy in the same way that the flowers and the budding trees open to the sun. Yes, that is the story of Easter. And now, boys and girls, our very first story that I've chosen is entitled That Old Favorite, Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was a very naughty, ran right to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. Now first he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes, and then feeling rather sick, he went about trying to see if he could find some parsley. But round the end of the cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on all 4 legs and went faster, so that he might have gotten away altogether if he hadn't not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wiggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. Now it would have been a beautiful place to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. And then he began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Kerchoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He just went back to work. Peter sat down to rest. Oh, he was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a while, he began to wander about, going lippity, lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him, and then Peter began to cry. Then, after a while, he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A large cat was sitting and staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back toward the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe, scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and behind him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some blackcurrant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole, and he shut his eyes. Now his mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But you know, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for their supper. And that, boys and girls, is this old story, Peter Rabbit. And now stay tuned, and we'll be back to read from our Big Do You Know book. Please stay tuned. Boys and girls, during Easter break, I want to remind you to be sure and visit any of your libraries. Any of the libraries in the Craven, Pamlico, Carteret Regional Library System, and check out some very good books on your very own library card. And now, boys and girls, I'm going to read from our Big Do You Know book. I want you to know that April Fool's Day actually lands on Easter Day this year. Do you know all about April Fool's Day? Do you know that April Fool's Day actually is in April every year, of course, and it's this year on Easter? Do you know April Fool's Day is celebrated every April the 1st in the United States and all around the world? Do you know April Fool's Day is also called All Fool's Day? Do you know April Fool's Day is not officially recognized as a holiday, but many people celebrate this day by pranking or pulling practical jokes on their friends? Do you know April Fool's Day is celebrated in different ways throughout the world? It is unknown exactly how the tradition originated. Do you know that some cultures see April Fool's Day as the first day of spring, celebrating merriment and feasting? Do you know children and adults in Italy and Belgium traditionally tack paper fishes on each other's back as a trick, and they shout, "April fish." Now that is funny. Boys and girls, be sure and have fun observing this old tradition on April Fool's Day by playing jokes on your friends, and have a good time doing it. Boys and girls, those are our Do You Knows for this morning. But I want to tell you our next story coming up is about an enchanted egg. And I brought along a real enchanted egg for you to see this morning. And here is the top of the enchanted egg. As you can see, it has beautiful flowers going all around the top of it. And as you look, you can see pink and blue, beautiful flowers on top of this enchanted egg. Boys and girls, this enchanted egg was made by my mother years ago, and on the bottom she wrote, Dixon, her last name, 1961, to John from Grandma. But let me show you inside. Inside you can see we have ducks swimming in a little pond and beautiful flowers that she painted going all around. And then right here we can even see cattails. And see down here we have a little nest filled with eggs. Beautiful, beautiful springtime in the egg that Mother made so long ago. I had to share it with you this morning. And now, stay tuned, and we'll be back with the story in just a moment. And now, boys and girls, I'm going to read one of my very favorite stories. It's entitled, The Enchanted Egg. A fuzzy yellow duck was the first to find the mysterious egg. He was crossing the green meadow on his way to Pussy Willow Pond for a swim. And there it was, lying in the deep grass under a clump of daisies. "Oh," he cried, "what a beautiful egg!" He waddled all around it, staring and staring. Oh, it was a lovely coral pink color with sparkly stars and tiny bluebells painted on it, and bands of squiggly white icing going up and down. Now, what do you suppose is inside, he wondered. Mrs. Robin was spring cleaning her nest in the old apple tree. "Come and see this big, beautiful egg," cried the fuzzy yellow duck. Mrs. Robin dropped her dust cloth and took off her blue gingham apron. She flew down from the treetop and hopped around the big egg, her bright eyes shining. Well, where did it come from?" she asked. "Oh, I don't know," said the fuzzy yellow duck. "It was just here. I think it's an enchanted egg." "Of course it is," said Mrs. Robin. She picked a buttercup and put it on her head to keep the sun off. "Let's roll it out from under these daisies," she said, "and then we can see it better." They squeezed in behind the enchanted egg. 1, 2, 3, go, shouted the fuzzy yellow duck, and they each gave a shove. The egg rolled out into the middle of the sunny meadow. They ran after it, but it didn't stop rolling. It went faster and faster till it was spinning like a top. Across the meadow it went, through the clover patch, and under the honeysuckle egg. Hurry, hurry, screamed the fuzzy yellow duck. It must roll into the woods. No, it mustn't, shrieked Mrs. Robin. It might get lost or broken or something. And so they raced on after the enchanted egg. Zip zoom, the egg rolled on down the hill, heading straight for Dinky Elf, the wee little house under the mushroom. Dinky was rocking in his rocking chair, feeling very lonely and wishing that something terribly exciting would happen. And just as he was wishing, the crash came. Bumpity, boom, bang. The enchanted egg struck against the door of Dinky's little house. Oh, it's an earthquake, yelled Dinky. He ran to open his door, but it would not budge. Oh, an atom bomb, howled Dinky. He ran to open his window, and then he scrambled onto the windowsill and peeped out. His whole front yard was filled with a large pink thing, all glittering in the sunshine. Mrs. Robin was perched on top, fanning herself with her buttercup bonnet. A fuzzy yellow duck was sprawled on the grass, very red in the face from running. Dinky jumped down from the window, landing in the middle of his prized tulips. Is it a flying saucer? He asked. Certainly not, said Mrs. Robin. It is an enchanted egg. Oh, how exciting, cried Dinky. How simply terrific. He bounced up and down with glee. Then he stopped bouncing. Enchanted means magic, he said. And if it's magic, it must do something. But what? Well, now we don't exactly know, said the fuzzy yellow duck. In fact, we don't know at all, ended Mrs. Robin. Just then, Great-Grandmother Owl flapped out from the deep pine wood. She settled down on top of the wee mushroom house and peered at the enchanted egg through her bifocal glasses. Mercy me, she screeched. I haven't seen an egg like that since I was a little girl. I wonder what picture is inside. Picture, cried Dinky, Mrs. Robin, and the fuzzy yellow duck. Well, there are always pictures inside of enchanted eggs, said Great-Grandmother Owl. Little scenes like flowers and waterfalls and fairy palaces. Just roll it over and look in the window. So they all pushed and pushed. The enchanted egg rolled backwards, and they found a little round window with its frame of scriggly white icing all around it. Everyone crowded up and peered inside. Oh, how marvelous! How simply super, shouted Dinky. Well, I see a castle with tall towers. I see knights in armor riding white horses, called the fuzzy yellow duck. Oh, I see fairy princesses on a balcony, whispered Mrs. Robin. Great-Grandmother Owl took off her bifocal glasses and wiped away a tear. I remember seeing pictures just like it when I was young, she sighed. They looked at the lovely scene for a long time. Then Great-Grandmother Owl said it was time for her to go home. But I'll be back tomorrow, she promised. And off she swooped into the deep pine wood. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to stay a while, said Mrs. Robin wistfully. So would I, said the fuzzy yellow duck. Oh, well, please do, said Dinky. We'll have a picnic. And he skipped into his wee house and came back with cookies and milk and a red checked tablecloth. Then he spread the cloth on the green lawn beside the enchanted egg. Oh, I just love picnics, he said. But you know, I've never had one because I didn't have any friends to invite. And now you've got me, cried Mrs. Robin. And me too, cried quacked the duck. Now they sat cross-legged on the lawn and ate their cookies and milk, and they kept looking at the wonderful picture inside the enchanted egg. The knights went on riding their white horses beneath the castle, and the fairy princess looked down from the balcony. And overhead the stars came out one by one. And that, boys and girls, is the story, The Enchanted Egg. And now stay tuned, and we'll be back with another Easter story in just a moment. And now, boys and girls, I'm going to read a surprise for Mrs. Bunny. In the woods there lived 8 little bunnies. Their names were Raleigh, Dolly, Trolley, Molly, Lolly, Wally, Polly, and Jolly. They all had great fun playing together. One day, one of the 8 little bunnies whispered to his sisters and brothers, "Tomorrow is Mother's birthday. Let's surprise her with a birthday present." Raleigh, the oldest, suggested they gather some branches from the nearby shrubs and make a big shopping basket. It was indeed a wonderful basket when it was finished, but it looked so empty. It would look much better filled with eggs. So the 8 little bunnies went off to ask their friend, the big white hen, for some eggs, and the hen promised that she would have them ready the very next day. The next morning, the 8 little bunnies went over to the hen's house, and each bunny carried home a big white egg. They put them in the basket, but it still did not look like a birthday present. The eggs were just plain everyday eggs. Little Trolley had a clever idea. "Let's paint each egg a different color," he said. So they all started out to find the color each of them liked the best. Dolly stopped to look through a nearby fence and saw a pretty flower garden full of lovely red roses, and Dolly painted her egg red like the roses. Trolley went to visit his friend, the little pig. The kind little pig gave Trolley a bunch of carrots to eat. "My, these taste good," said Trolley, "and they are such a nice color." So Trolley painted his egg orange like the carrots. Raleigh met a yellow duck. "Oh, how wonderful your feathers look in the bright sunshine." And Raleigh went home and painted his egg yellow like the duck feathers. Molly went to a nearby vegetable garden, and in the vegetable garden grew the best lettuce in the country. Molly was fond of lettuce and ate as much as she could of the leaves, and Molly painted her egg the lovely green color of lettuce. Wally soon grew tired of looking for a pretty color and lay down on the grass. He looked up at the sky. Oh, it was so beautiful, a beautiful blue, and Wally decided to paint his egg blue like the sky. Lolly sat down to write a birthday poem for Mama, but alas, she spilled the ink all over her egg. So Lolly had to paint her egg black like the ink. Polly went for a walk along the border in the woods, and everywhere she saw beautiful, dainty purple violets. And Polly painted her egg the same purple color as violets. Jolly was a lazy bunny and fell asleep while the others were out. Poor Jolly was very sad because now he did not have a colored egg for Mama's basket. "Surprise, surprise," called all the bunnies, all except Jolly, who was saying because he did not have but a white egg. Then Mrs. Bunny saw the beautiful basket. "Oh, what a lovely present. This is the happiest birthday I've ever had." But that was not the whole surprise. Just then there was a sharp, crackling sound. It was the white egg. It broke in two, and out stepped a little yellow chick. "Oh, this is the most wonderful surprise of all," exclaimed Mrs. Bunny. And you know, the 8 little bunnies thought so too. And so, boys and girls, we close our book of stories for this morning, but we'll be back next Saturday morning. Until then, this is Eleanor Hawkins saying bye-bye for Telestory time.